Good evening. Hello, we're live. Always find this bit very weird. We haven't started the podcast yet, but hi, I'm not Michael Bailey. You may recognise me from other On the Ball pods. Michael is at the Norwich City Fans Social Club mental health awareness evening tonight, so he won't be here, but we are carrying on with the pod. Regardless, of course, we have his permission to do that before you ask. We've got a win to talk about, so should be good. I am going to introduce our panel for the evening now. We've got Zoe and we've got Elliot, and they'll be joining us in a moment. And I hate doing this bit, so I'm going to take them off and going to plow straight on with the podcast without further ado. As soon as I can find the music, we'll play it and we'll get started. Hello and welcome to On the Ball, the podcast that is looking forward to a fresh lease of life with a new guy at the helm. You join us for episode 124 of the On the Ball podcast, and I'm Steve Sanders, aka at NCFC Numbers, sitting in for Michael Bailey. Norwich City have a very permanent looking new man in charge. I'm just keeping the presenter's chair warm for 1 week, with Michael hosting the Norwich City Fans Social Club's much more worthy mental health awareness evening at Carrow Road tonight. So think of me as Alan Russell, just without the Polonex and the modelling career. In fact, I'm kind of quite a long way away from either of those things. So has the countdown to the playoffs begun? Well, Norwich City are up to 5th with 4 more goals, 3 more points, 2 wins from 2 under a new manager and 1 buoyant fan base. We'll talk more about the Wagner bounce, the Wiki Wild Wild West. I hope someone gets that reference. Whether it's possible to be unhappy with the first half in which you score 3 goals. Answer, yes, it is. And ask if the stress levels are worth it. And maybe it would have been better if we just stuck with Dean Smith a little bit longer. Answer, no, it wouldn't. Plus, farewell, Todd. We hardly knew ye, apart from your love of beanie hats and giving out Christmas presents. And as this is our last pod before January, we'll try out some wild and clueless transfer speculation without a journalist in the room. And we'll look ahead to a corker at the Carrot in a fortnight. Well, we've gone for the inverse effect with our panel tonight. More goals equals fewer pundits. But don't worry, because it's very much a quality over quantity job. So who have we got on? Well, there was a time when Zoe Morgan didn't used to appear on the Ball after a Norwich City win at all. Nowadays, it doesn't feel like a win unless Zoe's on. So I'm pleased to say Zoe Morgan is here. How are you, Zoe?
Hello, NCFC Numbers. I am good, thank you. Absolutely buzzing to be on for it's my second post-win appearance ever. So very pleased about that, and I've just got tons to say, so can't wait to say it all.
Excellent. The first one being at some point in the Dean Smith era, right?
Yeah, it was. I can't remember it now, like much of the rest of it. So, yeah.
that whole year. We just won't talk about it. And our second guest tonight, we've got Norwich City podcaster, fan, and one half of the finest On the Ball double act that we've seen. It's Elliot Lake. Elliot, it's been a while. How are you doing?
Hi, Steve. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it has been a while. I was literally just thinking then that the last time I was on, I think was one of Dean Smith's first game in charge. And now I'm here a year later at one of Neil Wagner's first game in charge. But yeah, same as Zoe, thought we were really happy with the win at the weekend. Fantastic. And yeah, good to see David Wagner get start.
Well, let's hope that that's not a sign of things to come, of the David Wagner era going the same way that the Dean Smith one did.
Hopefully not.
Yes, the other half of your double act, Rob, has dislocated his shoulder snowboarding. Am I right? Is that right?
Yeah, I think he was in the French Alps last week, and he had a fall going over what he described to me as the tiniest jump in the resort, and he dislocated his shoulder. So yeah, I hopefully he's doing well. If he's watching, we hope you're doing well, Dobby. But yeah, unfortunately not able to join us.
Yeah, but we do wish you well. And Dobby is Rob's nickname, right?
Sorry, Dobby is Rob's nickname. I've just known him as Dobby my entire life, so it's hard for me to revert back to Rob.
Well, Harry Potter did fine without Dobby, didn't he? I think so. So maybe it'll work out well for you. Anyway, we should crack on, and you are already leaving your comments, which is great. If you have any more suggestions for the newly created On the Ball drinking game, then do let us know, and drink responsibly. Anyway, without further ado, I think it's time for the headline act. So far, so good with the music, I think. We will talk Todd. I promise that we will talk Todd. Obviously, that's the big news that's come out tonight. But first, I think we'll go back to Saturday. Why not? The craziness at the CBS, which is apparently Coventry's new stadium name. Norwich City were 2 up inside 10 minutes for the first time in the league for 12 years, 3 up inside 20 minutes for the first time in 6 years, and 3-2 up inside half an hour for the first time in, I literally have no idea how long. It finished 4-2, and only Paul Lambert and Daniel Farke's Norwich City teams had scored 4 or more goals in back-to-back games in the last 40 years. You can add David Wagner to that list, not bad, after just 3 matches in charge. Zoe, I suppose we could describe this as classic championship fare if it wasn't the polar opposite of everything we've been served up so far this season. But this is more like what we were hoping for at the start of the season, wasn't it? What a bloody good game of football that was.
It was so much fun. And I think it had the commentators on the telly sort of breathlessly saying, this is why we love the championship. I think it wasn't just the Sky commentators that said that, but I think it was also on the EFL highlights show. This is why the championship is the best league in the world. And I don't know whether that's a sort of thinly veiled insult as to sort of quality of defending or the wildness of it all. But it really, really was what is so fun about the championship. It was chaos. It was fun. It was unpredictable, and it didn't come with that sort of constant level of feeling so nervous you might throw up that every Premier League game that we get even slightly close to getting a point from seems to do. It was just really good fun. And yeah, it was just a good game. I think probably 3-2 at half time probably flattered Coventry a little bit. I think we were well on top. And one thing I probably would take umbrage with David Wagner was that he didn't enjoy that first half. It didn't please him. I think it pleased the rest of us. It very much felt like our Norwich was back, and what he referred to as Wild West football is something he might have to get used to, because we've got a bunch of cowboys that enjoy that kind of thing, and it's interesting. Maybe this is the difference between him and Farke, is that I think Farke would have absolutely loved that bit of it. He would have reveled in it. He was all about the entertaining. It was almost like they were, we would go through periods back in the Farke heyday of sort of almost playing out of our skin for half an hour and then almost just thinking about something else for 15, 20 minutes, letting the other team back in it, and almost playing chicken until we thought we properly had to turn it back on again and somehow end up getting a last minute winner or an equaliser. I'm not sure that will go down so well with Wagner. But if we keep scoring 4 goals in a game, then however we do it, I don't think anyone will be complaining too much.
Yeah, I was slightly disappointed to hear that he wasn't happy with the first half. I suppose that old cliche of managers not enjoying 3-3 draws or whatever. I think a lot of our fans would have agreed a couple of weeks ago that we had a bunch of Cowboys playing as well, but maybe not for the reasons that you're suggesting now. Elliot, the first half was pretty insane. Can you ever remember anything like that? And what were your emotions watching it? Obviously, I guess the same as most of ours, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, we completely blew them away for 15, 20 minutes. To score 3 goals as quickly as that, it does take you back, though. He's right to the Daniel Farke era. But I think when you go 3-0 up like that in a game, you shouldn't concede 2 more goals before half time. I kind of agree with the manager a little bit there, in that once you score 3 goals, why concede those 2? It meant that we had what should have been an easy second half, turned a little bit trickier. We played really well in the second half, but there's no need to concede those goals. Especially the first goal, I think they fell asleep a little bit. The throw-in comes in, it goes to the back post. They win a header back across in the midfield, aren't they, picking up the second ball? I mean, that was for me an easy goal to defend. And had we defended that, it would have been much more of an easy win in the end. But I don't want to take the gloss off it. 4-2 away at Coventry is fantastic. 32% of Steve, your NCFC numbers, you'll probably be able to tell me that is that 32% of the goals that were scored in the entirety of Dean Smith's premiership scored in David Wagner's 2 or first away games. Is that right?
I think that the total number of away goals that we'd scored under Dean Smith, 32% of those have already been scored under Wagner.
Yeah. I mean, that's just fantastic. And I think getting players forward is something that we didn't do under the previous manager. And just to see that the like Hernandez on one side, Dowell, Sargent, Pookie, all determined to get into the box and get on the end of things was fantastic to see. And that's probably the reason why we scored 3 such quick goals in the first 30 minutes. But then going into the second half, I thought we were brilliant. We had a really professional performance, which is exactly what you need if we want to push for the playoffs. I still probably hold out see if we can overtake Sheffield United, although I've been told by my colleagues at work that is very unlikely. But we could certainly make the playoffs. And, the last time we were in the playoffs, we did a great job over Ipswich and then bullied Middlesbrough in the final, which hopefully we could do again this year. But I've got to say, I love that playoff campaign. That was probably my favourite memory as a Norwich fan. So I would love to do that all over again.
Well, it does, and it does sort of feel like a similar start under Wagner, if not even better than the one that we got under Alex Neil. And Ryan Livermore on last week's podcast was talking about the potential for, if we're down to single figures in terms of the gap between us and Sheffield United or Burnley, come with 10 games to go, then it's still possible and they might get nervous. So let's rule nothing out yet, although I can't believe that we're saying this given where we were a few weeks ago. It was a good day for the supporting cast for Tammy Pookie, wasn't it, Zoe? 3 of Norwich City's midfielders scored. Was there anyone in particular that you wanted to pick out in terms of an individual performance?
Well, for me, it always comes back to Onel.
Of course it does.
I should have
just teed you up for Onel, really, shouldn't I? I knew it was going to be him.
Dear sweet Onel. I sort of had it geared up in my mind. If you asked me which one was my favourite goal, then it was definitely Onel's, just because he nearly messed it up.
It's classic Onel.
Absolutely, just vintage Onel Hernandez. Such a lovely move. Sargent's touch, wonderful. Pookie, perfect. Comes to Onel. Sort of no one anywhere near him. Like everything, is sort of clear path. Somehow, about 18 touches later, he's got about 8 defenders around him and the goalie's well positioned. And yet there he is, the goalkeeper, so enthralled to Onel Hernandez, aren't we all? That he just sort of palms it into his own net. And it was just classic Onel. And it just, I don't know, I've gone through sort of conflicted feelings about him this season, because he's sort of been the one sort of bit of hope that we've all had to cling on to, I think, in a sort of otherwise quite dire experience up until now. And the fact that he's been back in the squad, the singing of his name, he has got the best song out of everybody. It's sort of that's been a lovely thing to cling on to, but also there's always been this thing in the back of my mind of like, yeah, but is it a bit pathetic that our one good thing is perhaps a player that a lot of us had thought maybe wasn't good enough for this squad? And there's just something very lovely about him. I didn't think he would start against Preston. He started against Preston. He started both of these games and he's really played a big part. He has provided that chaos that I think a good championship side needs, just to unsettle people, just to worry people when they don't know what he might do. He seems a lot more focused. He seems to know what he's doing and he seems to be really enjoying it. And I think that sort of marriage of a kind of fan favourite, someone who loves the club, plus that success and him actually doing really well, I think it's just such a nice thing, and I hope long may it continue. And perhaps next time he scores, he'll take it slightly more cleanly.
Although he did score and then did a front flip, which have we seen a front flip from Onel before? I feel like that was a new.
Did you, when he was halfway round, did you think that he was somehow going to land on his head? It didn't quite feel like he was going to get all the way round, and that was concerning. But it very lovely, very lovely.
It wasn't like the goal where he just suddenly had a moment halfway through. He's like, "What am I doing here?" I mean, I have to say, I think the point you make about he knows what he's doing now, I think that's a really pertinent one, actually, because the temptation with someone like Onel Hernandez is to think, just give him the ball and let him do his thing. But actually, I think with someone like Wagner, who I will be much more inclined to coach him to play in a certain way, I sort of feel like that's going to be beneficial for him, because I think he's somebody that needs to be told, right, this is what we want you to do, and you've got to stand here, and we believe in your ability to do it, but this is what you need to do in order to be able to achieve that. And I think we're sort of seeing the evidence of that in the first 2 games. I thought he was really excellent on Saturday, and obviously could have had a second, hit the post second half. So yeah, I mean, hopefully this is the renaissance of Onel Hernandez, because it feels like we've been here before. The other player who, 3 of the team that started on Saturday are out of contract in the summer, I believe. I think it's just 3. Tammy Pukki we've talked about a lot. Onel Hernandez is another. And the third is Kieran Dowell, Elliot. And I think I listened back to last week's podcast, which I don't normally do, but I was thinking we kind of didn't give Dowell a fair praise that week. So basically putting all the pressure on you to do exactly that. But what did you think? I mean, I thought, again, he stood out to me.
Yeah, I think he's one of those players which will benefit from having players up the pitch around him a little bit more, in terms, rather than sort of trying to build a little bit more from the back and being less direct. Even if he can get close to Pukki, then he's shown that he can get on the end of second balls and score goals like he's done in the last couple of weeks. And again, he's never really had a true run of games in a Norwich shirt, which I think anyone needs, regardless of how they're viewed by the fans or the manager. I think the more games you play, the more you fit in with the system. I think jury's out really on whether Dow should get a new contract. I think he's got to do it for more than just 2 games. 3 goals in 2 games. Any player can have a bright spell over the course of the season. 5 to 10, not 5, no, maybe 5 to 8 for the rest of the season. I think to warrant a new contract, because so far he hasn't really done it. But yeah, I'd obviously love to see him do well. Just go back to Hernandez. I just want to mention that when he came out and got involved with the drummer, with his Man of the Match award with the City Elite, I thought that was so good, and it just shows what a really nice fella he is, and down to earth, and how and that drum is obviously making a bit of a difference for the players. The fact that he wanted to go out there and get involved with the drum and have a little play on it, I thought that was fantastic. Love to see that.
Yeah, I feel like if getting a Norwich City tattoo and praising the local Argos wasn't enough to get the fans on side, then that was definitely going to be it. I like this idea of performance-related contracts as well. 5 goals for Dowell, that's incentive enough, I would say, to give him a new deal. So what are we saying then, Zoe, in terms of the new contracts for Onel and Dowell? Would you get them to sign on the dotted line now, or are you playing hardball like Elliot and waiting for a few more good performances?
It's a really tough one, I suppose, timing wise, because we just really don't know what league we're going to be in next year. The optimist among us may think, play hardball, because we've been here before, right? We've been here when we've had a squad that's got Hernandez and Dowell in it, and neither of them have been good enough for the Premier League in the past, for one reason or another. If we're in the Championship, we know that they're both probably good enough, on their day, especially with Dowell, good enough for to be part of a good Championship side. So it is a really tough one. It is a tough one, and requires a more shrewd negotiator than I. I have full trust in Stuart Webber, obviously. but yeah, it is a tough one. It would be like kicking a kitten if he's told Onel now that you were thinking about not giving him a new contract. I think, he's said many times that he'd like to, he wants to stay in Norwich. He loves Norwich. He wants to be there. Yeah, it's too hard. It's too hard to say you can't give him a contract. Even if he then ended up going out on loan, I think I could deal with that better. Dowell's an interesting one. I think I think he's a really good player. I think he's just got to be used properly. I think the problem with him is it's quite easy for him to look like he's not doing anything. Like he's not running, when he's played sort of slightly out of position, or, the team is not functioning very well around him. I think it's quite easy for Dowell to look lazy, a bit slow, a bit like he's not concentrating properly. When he's fully in it and he's fully on, there's not anyone else in that squad that can do what he can do, especially with Pukki and that link up with Pukki. But he is sort of him, he's with Ben Gibson, in the scapegoat club, in terms of the ones you hear get shouted at the most when things aren't going well. And that's because he doesn't always look completely engaged with it. But I don't think that's his fault. I just think that's sort of the vibe that he gives off.
He is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be less like kicking a kitten and more like kicking a buffalo or something that you weren't going to damage.
Relatively hardy dog. Yeah.
Okay. We do not advocate kicking any animal, by the way, on the Ball podcast. Yeah. So let's just make that absolutely clear. Nolly makes the point that if we're in the champ again next season, there probably won't be much to spend. So extending might be a necessity. That's a sobering thought for us all there, that actually it might just be we can't afford anyone better, which is a reasonable enough argument.
We've spent all the money, haven't we? So, as we keep hearing, so yeah.
Yes, there's nothing left. We've got absolutely nothing left. Just a quick word on Coventry. Neil Luther says, funny how both Preston North End and Cov saying that's the worst they have played this season. Surely it's down to the new, are we going wag ball or varg ball we're playing? Jury's out on that one. But I thought Coventry looked really. I'm split because actually, yes, we could have been more in front of the first half, but I thought they pressed us really quite well in that first half, and then kind of ran out of steam in the second half and allowed us to take the control back that you were talking about, Elliot. So I don't know what everyone else thought, what you guys thought about their performance, I suppose, compared to Preston.
I thought Coventry were good. I was really impressed by Casey Palmer. I know he got the goal and was. I thought his overall ball carrying capacity was good. I think he's kind of a player which I wouldn't mind even having at Norwich, that type of player. I know he probably can afford it, but maybe more than what I'd hoped Gabriel Sara would be. I know Sara played quite well at the weekend defensively and offensively, but maybe carrying the balls and getting a little bit more forward with the ball. I thought Casey Palmer was good, but yeah, I must admit I haven't seen much of Coventry over the season, so I wouldn't be able to make any judgment on whether that's their worst performance. But I certainly think in the first 30 minutes or first 15, 20 minutes that we played well enough for their fans to boo, which probably says quite a lot. Yeah, I thought both against Coventry and Preston we kind of blew away a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, very good point. And I think, to be honest, at that stage, I feel like we've covered that. It's a quick way of doing 6 goals, but I think we can move on to the things that we are not going to talk about, which we are, of course, rebranding as Twangta. I'm going to say that carefully. Yep, I'm in charge, so I do need to behave, and I know others before me have tripped up, haven't they, Michael? Has anybody got? Have either of you got anything that you do not want to talk about?
One thing, I suppose, if we're talking about the race to automatic promotion, which we have very much joined, I would say, Sheffield United's transfer embargo. Don't want to talk about that. Perhaps get them docked 20 points or something for all of this rule breaking they've been doing. Perhaps that might help us in our sort of march onwards to second. Although if they did have 20 points deducted, then we wouldn't have the supreme glory of having overtaken them from where we are now, which I still think is possible. So perhaps we won't.
It would make the championship a lot more fun, though, wouldn't it? So maybe they should just do it purely for that reason. I mean, if they've broken the rules, then dock them points, but also just for for pure entertainment. It would be absolutely crazy, that fight for second place then, and we'd be right in it, wouldn't we? Elliot, anything that you didn't want to talk about?
I don't really want to talk about the goalkeeper situation. Maybe you two can enlighten me a little bit more about what you think. But from what I've seen this season, I thought the Gun's been playing fairly well, and now he seems to be. I'm not saying that Krul's a bad goalkeeper. I think he's great. He's had a fantastic Norwich City career, but I don't know. I'm not sure Gunn deserves to lose his place, but maybe you guys think otherwise.
Well, we touched on this the other week, and in fact, funnily enough, Neil Luther at exactly the same time says Tim Krul versus Angus Gunn, battle of the keepers. Don't want to talk about that. So on the same wavelength there. The weird thing is that Tim Krul's record is considerably better when he plays than Angus Gunn, and whether there's any correlation there between performances, I'm not sure, because I think Angus probably has looked the better of the two this season. In fact, I would say almost certainly. And actually, Saturday was kind of an extension of that again, because there was some seriously interesting kicking in that first half, which put us under a bit of pressure, even when we were sort of 2-0 up, I think. What do you think, Zoe? Are you? I don't know if you have to be on Team Tim or Team Angus these days, but which side of that would you come down on?
It's such a tough one. When the team was announced for Preston and Gunn wasn't in it, a lot of people talking sort of on social media about how that was an absolutely massive decision. But actually, I think the problem is that in the grand scheme of things, it's not. They're so close that it's not. It's not crazy to pick one or the other. Like it's not absolutely. It's not madness to go down on Team Tim or Team Angus. I was at the Preston game, and Tim Krul could not have been more excited to be playing. Like he charged out at the beginning. He was beating his chest at the fans. He was so pumped up. I was sort of grumbling sort of in the first 15 minutes that I hope the ball didn't come anywhere near him, because he seemed so amped up that he's liable to do anything when he gets the ball in that kind of state. So there's no doubt that he is a big character to have in the team, and for all of his dubious kicking and sort of overexcitement, I think that presence that he has, I think does really impact the team, and I think especially if we do sort of get up a bit of momentum, we do get up a bit of a head of steam, having someone like that, I think it's a really useful asset. And that's not saying anything against Angus, but they're not the same in that regard. Angus is a lot quieter. You don't get that same sort of vibe coming off him, I guess. And for that reason, and that I can kind of understand going with Krul, especially with Wagner. He wants to make that impact. He wants to, get them going a bit. Picking the goalkeeper that is going to get the other players going. Having said that, Krul does make some weird decisions sometimes, and yeah, it's quite fun. But in a tight game, where we haven't scored 4 goals, that can be a bit. That it might lead to some quite nerve-wracking situations. I also want to know, was the cap that he put on for like 10 minutes in the first half, was that Wagner's cap? Because Wagner no longer had a cap on during that time. And I want to know if he lent Krul his special cap.
Did those two things happen simultaneously then? Krul gained a cap and Wagner lost one?
Yes. Well, he wasn't... when you just can't remember what things were before, I think Wagner had his cap on before, but then Krul definitely had the same cap that Wagner wears on for a bit, and Wagner was not wearing a cap during that time. So I think he maybe forced it on. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it could have happened when Coventry scored one of the goals. Either Wagner ran onto the pitch and put it on Krul's head, or maybe kind of threw it across to him like a frisbee, and Krul just plucked it out of the air using his hand. Either of those things could have happened without the cameras being on them. If you're at the ground and you're listening,
Do let us know.
do let us know how that happened, and if indeed, I mean, it seems unlikely, but was it David Wagner's hat that Tim Krul put on? Who knows? And maybe that's that could make all the difference to Tim's performances. Maybe he needs to keep the cap.
Keep the cap. The magic cap.
The magic cap. It sort of feels to me a little bit like 20. What was the season we went up under Farker? 2018-19, when actually that run of games, sort of around Christmas time, maybe a little bit beforehand, where he was making individual errors, and yet we were still winning the games. Mm-hmm. So at that point, obviously, he didn't have as much competition, because I think Michael McGovern would have been second choice, who's still here. But there was never that much question over Krul losing his place, whereas now it does feel like we have got better competition, which can only be a good thing, I suppose.
And obviously, we don't want to say... Sorry, Elliot, you carry on.
Sorry, no, you go, Zoe.
I was just going to say we don't want to upset friend of the podcast, Brian Gunn, by suggesting that Tim's the better choice, I would say.
Also very true. Yes, no one wants to upset Brian Gunn, do they? Let's go on, Elliot.
I was just going to add to Zoe's point. I guess that maybe one of the things you don't necessarily see from the stand is the role in the organisation of the defence that the goalkeeper plays, and perhaps Tim Krul has a lot of that, has a lot of attributes in that department, which is super important, as well as just shot stopping, which is obviously what people see at like a very superficial level. But yeah, his organisation is obviously a hugely important part of why he's being selected, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also on Bamadelli, I've always wanted him to play, and I'm so happy that he's back in. He's got to play for me.
Do I remember rightly that you had an Oma Bamadelli song lined up at one point?
No, I had an Oma Bamadelli shirt.
Oh, you had a shirt.
Year,
yes.
But I was going to write a song, but I haven't got around to it.
Okay.
Next time I come on, if he's first team regular, I'll promise I'll have a song.
Yeah, when you come on and we've just sacked David Wagner and appointed our new manager, whenever that is, you can wheel out the Oma Bamadelli song. Well, at least you can wear the shirt with pride now, knowing that he's on the pitch. One other thing, obviously worth mentioning, is the minutes applause for 8-year-old Amber Sheehy, and the hashtag clap for Amber applause. That was obviously really well observed by both ends of the ground, and obviously the scenes after the game with her family, which were incredibly emotional. And of course, the way that the players posed with the shirts, you could tell just how close some of the players were with Amber. And I just think it was one of those moments where, an obviously incredibly sad and tragic thing, football kind of turned that into something quite emotional and quite beautiful, really. So obviously that was kind of heartening in a way. Less heartening was Dimi Yanulis getting hauled off again at half time. Somebody asked me how many times has that happened. I make it 5. He's been subbed off now at the Etihad, Stamford Bridge, the Valley, Kenilworth Road, and the CBS Arena. So I don't know how long he'd have to stay to be taken off at all 92 Football League grounds. But, he's making his way through. And actually, Sam McCallum came on and did quite well, set up the 4th goal. So interesting to see who plays in that position in a fortnight's time. And then the only other thing I'd observed was just David Wagner in the community, seen at the Warwick Arms after the Preston game on the Sunday, I think, and also visited the Nest. So he's already making his mark, isn't he? Just
doesn't he look well as well?
Doesn't he?
For a 50-plus-year-old man, he just looks in prime physical condition. It's really nice. I mean, usually when managers have been out of work for a while, they do tend to suddenly look quite vibrant, and then it takes about a month of being back in a job before the poor health kicks in. But yeah, he is still looking very vibrant, and yes, I hope he continues to get out and about, because he seems like a fun presence to have around, definitely.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the different shades of grey in his hair as well. He seems to be sort of a lighter grey at the back and a darker grey at the front, which reminds me of Chris Hughton's sort of 2 shades of grey that he used to go. He went left and right. Wagner's going front and back. Who knows if it's a style thing? I suspect not. But he wears it well, as you say, Zoe. Well, if there's nothing else that you don't want to talk about, then I think we move on to sort of part B of part 2, which is the transfer window. Don't have a sting for that, so and I'm not going to sing anything. Elliot, you might have to come up with a song about that next time you're on, if the timing's right. I suppose the obvious one is Todd Cantwell, isn't it? We've sort of teed that one up. So within the last, I want to say 4 or 5 hours, he has joined Rangers for an undisclosed fee. I think that one had been on the cards for quite a while. I'm kind of conflicted with how to feel about this one, Zoe. I know that you have a special bond with Todd. I don't know if I said it like that. But he comes up regularly on the in the WhatsApp group. Let's put it that way. And yeah, it's going to be strange to think of Norwich City without him in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way of putting it. I think. I'm fascinated with Todd. I think that's the thing. Yes. He's never been my favorite player. He's never, he rarely sort of, really did it for me, even when he played really well, he was rarely the person that I came away talking about, thinking about. But yet he is an absolutely fascinating human being. I think just this sort of big mass of contradictions and sort of self-awareness coupled with a complete lack of self-awareness, and he sort of paints this picture of being sort of, I don't know, I guess otherworldly sometimes, but yeah, which is just incredibly local at the same time, and it just really, really fascinating character. And just the last few years, I've just been quite upsetting, I would say, in terms of thinking about Todd. Like, yeah, there's lots of jokes to be made, and when it boils down to it, his performances have been largely terrible and certainly not up to the standard where we think he's capable of. But just in terms of a talented young player, especially who's come through our youth system, who had so much promise, it's all gone wrong in the last couple of years, for whatever reason. I've got absolutely no idea what that reason is, but multiple managers have come to the same conclusion about Todd, which suggests something is going a little bit wrong there. And I've talked about it on the podcast before, and sort of talked about how he's always felt like there's something. It certainly feels like he's always felt like there's something more for him than Norwich City, but at the same time he's sort of forgotten to do the stage where he's Norwich City's best player first, and it's like he sort of tried to bypass that bit. And he doesn't see, he certainly hasn't seemed particularly happy over the last couple of years. The game when we played Aston Villa at home, sort of around Christmas time last season, when half the squad were throwing up because they had COVID or whatever at half time. It's one of the weirdest performances I've seen from an individual player, I think, in however long of watching football. He seemed completely out of it. Like, he didn't feel like he sort of really knew what was going on. Whether he was poorly or not, I don't know. But something has gone on with him. And it's come to a point where he's leaving, and it's almost like, well, doesn't really, like, I don't have any emotions about it. It's almost like, well, kind of slight bit of relief that the whole saga is over. A slight bit of hope that he can rebuild something somewhere else, but also quite a lot of fear that he's going to get eaten alive in Glasgow. And, he does seem quite vulnerable, sort of, as a person. I don't think he is the prima donna that he kind of, a lot of people presume he is, just because he's got long curly hair. I don't think it's that with him, but there's an element of something where he maybe doesn't align the amount of work that he has to do with how good he is or will be, I don't know. But I hope that he does really well at Rangers. I hope that it works out. I'm worried that it won't. And I'm not worried that we have made the wrong decision by letting him go. I think I'm at that stage now.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like kind of letting your child out into the world, doesn't it? Well, whatever that feels like. What do you make of it, Elliot? I mean, I think Zoe's kind of touched on a lot of what's gone wrong there. He hasn't had a goal or an assist for us in over 18 months. Are you conflicted, or are you sort of thinking we've missed an opportunity, or is this the right time?
I think the only opportunity we've missed is not selling him 3 years ago. I think we could have taken some money back. You know, when we around the sort of time where we sold players like Jamal Lewis slightly after the Murphys. Actually, if you look at that we probably made some good deals there. Jamal Lewis, I mean, he's not playing for Newcastle, not even in the squad. Godfrey's doing it right for Everton, not pulling up any trees. One of the Murphys, I think, plays in League One now, does he? One's at Newcastle, obviously done pretty well. But Cantwell could have easily been one of those players which we sold for 15, 20 million pounds, who turned out not to be the player that everyone thought he was. Unfortunately, we kept him for too long, and it's now. I wouldn't say it's turned sour, and I completely agree with Zoe. Like, I really, really want him to do well at Rangers. I would love to see him go there, and be one of Michael Beale's star players and take them to the SPFL title. I would love to see it so much. But actually, maybe you look at it and think Daniel Farke did an unbelievable job with these players to make them into players which were worth 10 million plus pounds in those seasons where we first got promoted under Farke, and then some of the young players did pretty well in the Premier League, although we got relegated. Yeah, I would love to see him do well. I just think it's a little bit too late that we've let him go. But I think I agree with Zoe. I'm happy that the Norwich City answer to Paul Pogba transfer saga is over, and we can kind of move on from the whole thing.
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, that's actually a really good comparison that I'd never thought of before. But I can't remember. Did Pogba go for free for Manchester United in the end? I mean, I don't know whether.
I think he went for free. Yeah,
okay.
And I'm not saying that Paul Pogba is the player that Todd Cantwell is, but yeah.
Yes, that's World Cup winner Paul Pogba there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was. I mean, I almost feel like I imagined this, but I don't think I did. I think Villa, we were sort of talking about when Villa were interested 18 months ago, whether they're interested or not, I don't know. This was just transfer speculation. There was talk of £40 million. And incidentally, I think we'd been asked by Beck, in fact, how many millions did we get for Todd? Are we going to reinvest? Honestly, no idea. I mean, you really, even... I'm not even sure if Michael were here if he'd be able to tell you. The fee is completely undisclosed, so not a clue. But obviously, contract up at the end of the year. Can't imagine it was much. Also, interesting, because it was Villa who were linked with him. Maybe that was genuine because obviously Michael Beale was there at that point, I think. So perhaps kind of rekindling that interest. Just to get an idea of what people are saying. Well, Zoe, you were worried about the comments earlier, so here's Norwich City, a FIFA story, saying excellent description of Todd, Zoe.
Well, if you look a little bit further down, there's less nice ones.
I hadn't seen that one. We will not be posting that one up.
Don't look, Zoe. Don't look.
Yeah, could be
probably said horrible stuff about me.
We don't know if he wasn't talking about either me or Elliot, to be honest. Nolly says Todd believed the hype of a few years ago, how good he was, and he wasn't. 3 managers gave him a chance last season and he failed all. Couldn't wait to get away from here then, so not missed now. And Declan Cotter has said hardly featured since the start of the PL car crash, which I assume was last season. Could have been either. Farke, Smith, Parker and Wagner now don't want him and he's run out of road. I think all that's fair. What I would say in defence of, well, I think we have slightly forgotten, or haven't mentioned at least, some of the moments that he had in a Norwich City shirt. And if you think of the goal he scored against Manchester City, which was arguably in some ways the finest goal we've scored in the last 5 or 10 years. The penalty against Spurs in the Cup, which he, I mean, this sort of sums up Todd Cantwell in many ways, doing keepy uppies as he gets to the penalty spot, but then sticking it up in the top corner in front of the Spurs fans. And also the Huddersfield 7-0 game, when everyone turned it on that day, but I distinctly remember Todd just being absolutely unplayable that game. And fantastic in the first half of our first Premier League season, before things started to kind of go wrong. And actually, before COVID hit, before that break, he was possibly our best player that season. So I can't disagree with any of what the two of you have said in terms of our reasons for getting rid now. But I think, I don't know. I'm just harking back to the good old days, I guess.
One of my favourite Norwich City photos of the last few years is of Todd and Jamal at the end of the Man City game, and they're having a cuddle, and they are both sort of laughing their heads off, and they just look completely shocked and surprised and overjoyed, just like the rest of us felt of like, what have we just done? What was that? And that's just, I'll probably always want to remember Todd by thinking about that photo. And of course, him doling out Christmas presents / cash in the Dereham area for the last 2 years. Classic Todd.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to be remembered doling out cash in the Dereham area, but hopefully for all the right reasons we'll remember him. And thank you to James Hotchkiss, who says the Times said £1.5 million. We don't know whether that was true or not, but let's assume it was around that.
It would be so interesting to know what we were offered. I know we'll never find out, but it would be so interesting.
If ever anything, actually. That's the thing as well.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point that you made, Elliot, because a lot of the players who did star in that 18-19 season, we did sell them at the right time. I think I remember talking about it on this podcast at the time, and we were talking about the 5 saleable assets that we had. It's an awful phrase to use when they're still at the club, but Jamal Lewis, Ben Godfrey, and Emi Buendia, we all got good fees for. Todd, obviously, we haven't, and Max is still here. So, and you would think the day he does leave, although let's not talk that up, that we'll get good money for Max. Let's just quickly round off the transfer window then. Tyrese Omatoye has joined Forest Green Rovers. That also came out today, kind of brushed under the carpet slightly with the Todd news, but we wish him all the best. In terms of incomings, I mean, I have not heard anything, but I don't really have my ear to the ground. The only other business that looks like it may happen is Jordan Hugo leaving, with David Wagner saying that it's unlikely. Well, he's talked about 3 strikers, hasn't he? And I think we know who they are. So yes, unless I've missed some potential incoming business. I mean, is there anything that either of you two would like to see before January 31st?
I personally would like to see another winger of some description. I think we've obviously got a few out on loan. I don't know how that works with recalling them or whether we even want them if they'd be up for it. But I think Hernandez has shown his value when he started the last 2 games. And I don't think we can rely on just him alone. I think we need another winger, possibly to play on that right-hand side. Sargent's not a natural wide player, so possibly a left-footed to play on the right to sort of sort of partner Hernandez a little bit in that way. I think that's probably the position I would be targeting.
Excellent. I think we're probably still slightly light in that area. Right. Just a couple of comments. Pulled up a lot of comments today, but we haven't mentioned Sarri yet properly, have we? And maybe he's going to be the Dowell of the next podcast. But Dowell and Sarri's performances at Coventry stood out. Their link-up play made a big difference, and the switch at left-back with McCallum gave us a better second half defensively, but still work to do. Thank you, Matthew. Can't disagree with any of that. And Nolly, who we've given a lot of airtime to tonight, says one of the training staff took the cap round to Tim after the first goal. Looked like Tim had asked for one. Don't know if it was Wagner's though. So the mystery remains unsolved.
It's still possible. It's still possible. Just like second place is still possible.
Yeah, I like to believe that both could happen. Anyway, I think that rounds up the things that have happened. So now let's look ahead to what's going to happen, or at least try and predict it.
This is almost fantasy football.
Yes, this is almost fancy football at the moment, actually. I mean, those words have never been more apt. And hopefully we'll be able to continue that in the next fixture, which is not against Birmingham City because they got through their FA Cup tie with Forest Green, and with Blackburn doing for us in the third round. That means we get the week off next week. And so does the podcast, by the way. So, sorry, another week without Michael, if you can all manage that. And that means that the next game is a tie that looked pretty ominous a couple of weeks ago, but now looks pretty mouth-watering, I would say. Burnley are coming to Carrow Road for another 12:30 p.m. kickoff on the 4th of February. We're back on telly again. Zoe, 9 wins in a row for Burnley. And I've written here, surely no catching the visitors in the table, although that obviously goes against the general feel of the podcast. Obviously, we're going to finish in the top 2, so we still obviously could catch them. But my God, I'm looking. I mean, just everything's positive at the moment, and this to me seems like a really, really exciting game.
Yeah, it is really exciting. It feels unfair that we've got to wait 2 weeks for another game. But sort of that you can argue that it's maybe a loss of our momentum, but it gives Wagner an extra week to be working with the players, to be getting to know the players, to be communicating what he wants them to achieve. And I don't think we could be in a better position to play Burnley. We're a bit sort of, we've got to throw everything at it, because we're in a bit of it's got to happen now, and it's got to happen for the rest of the season if it's going to happen. So got to throw everything at it. Burnley are, for all intents and purposes, up. There is always an element of coasting, I think, when you get to this stage of the season. So, that for them to keep that concentration up. And, they were trying to keep things exciting with their sort of last minute free kick the other day. But we know that if it was us back in the day, we would have left that another few minutes before we'd bothered trying to do that. So, I think we have got a good chance. I don't think it's going to be easy. It's going to be a really interesting game, I think, to see. I think these players, the Norwich players, believe that they are as good as the Burnley players, and having had a bit of a reminder that perhaps, they actually are recently, I think they'll be bang up for it. And wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to put a few past Burnley and just really... I think what we need to do is start concerning some of the other sides around us, and put a bit of a marker down for the rest of the season. And what better way to do that than by beating, the current champions elect, and maybe by 4 or 5 goals. That would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many goals we would get if we scored 4 every single time we play between now and the end of the season, but surely it's got to be more than 100 if we manage to do that. Quite often with these, you kind of look at the reverse fixture, but actually, in the second half of the season anyway, but there's kind of no point in that at all. That was the biggest reality check of the season for me, in that we just went there and did not compete or even try and compete, really. And obviously only ended up 1-0, but it was such a sort of anti-Norwich City Championship performance. This, Elliot, feels like it's going to be completely different. And also we'll have had a fortnight's break. So I don't know if that is going to be beneficial to have had the extra time. Burnley are still in the cup. Haven't done my homework on who they're playing, but they will be playing next week. I mean, do you feel like that's an advantage to have the extra week's rest, or would you rather just keep the fixtures coming at this point?
I think probably I'd rather just keep the fixtures going. I think just playing Saturday to Saturday is fine. I don't think you need any more of a break than that. I think what is an advantage is that the fans will be so up for that game, with David Wagner's first home game in charge after 2 away fixtures where we've scored 4 goals. I mean, I think the atmosphere is going to be electric in Carrow Road that day, 12:30 kickoff. Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. I wish I could go. But yeah, it's going to be great to watch on TV. But yeah, I think we've got every chance to beat them or take the game to them. I just think we've got to get players forward. I think if we do that, then we've got a good chance of giving Burnley a bit of a scare. And Zoe's absolutely right. The teams we do need to scare are the teams around us. If we put in a positive, good performance against Burnley and score a few goals, then they're going to be thinking, "Oh, Norwich, we don't want to play them."
Yeah. I think it would be a kind of a statement game, and I guess the first really big test for Wagner. So we'll see if he passes it. Thank you very much to James Hotchkiss, who says Burnley have Ipswich, which is as good as a week off for them too. On current form, you may be right. In terms of the team, then, Zoe, I mean, Robert Marshall said Angus needs to start in goal for Burnley. I think we've done the Krul and Angus thing to death. So a quick verdict on that. But then, is there anything else you would change? I suppose left back is the main area of contention, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the question. I think it'd be pretty harsh to change anyone else. They've been playing so well. That midfield is starting to look a lot more settled, which is nice. This, and the more they play together, the more that understanding will come. Left back is an interesting one. On his day, what Dimmy offers going forward, is the best we've got at the club. But he does have a tendency of being run ragged a little bit for sort of chunks of the game. And I think that sort of batters his confidence sometimes a little bit. And then he gets sort of caught between not knowing quite where to be and a little bit confused. So, yeah, it's a tough call. He played so well against Preston that you sort of want to give him a chance. But then McCallum, when he came on against Coventry, also played really well. So I think you get a bit more stability perhaps with McCallum, although sometimes his decision making isn't great. Also, you get the aerial ability, a bit more sort of strength, I think, as well with McCallum. So I guess it depends how all-out attack he wants to go, especially in that first half. Wagner, I wouldn't be disappointed with either of them playing, though.
Yeah, I think it's good to have them both fit, I suppose, as well. That's a luxury that we didn't have in the first half of the season. So, yeah, really good point. Right. Well, I think we've probably, as we near the hour mark, have pretty much run out of. Well, we haven't run out of time because we've got all the time in the world. But I don't know if there's any more to discuss beyond Kenny other business. Now, I don't want to put pressure on the two of you, but last week the guests came with a quiz and played a song on the guitar. So, I don't necessarily expect those levels, but was there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't brought up for Kenny?
I certainly don't think that man on the comments wants to hear me sing, so I won't do that.
Perhaps you could flap for him.
Well, talking of flapping, actually, obviously a good subject to go into. One thing I was going to raise was Onel Hernandez puns reaching the mainstream media this week with the EDP talking about a swan on the loose, terrorizing local residents who, I think it was maybe Dave Freezer, had nicknamed Onel Swananders, which I just like to bring up as, very proud of, the Onel Hernandez puns reaching that wider audience. But surely it was Swanel Hernandez. Surely that was the better one.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to concur. Like, of course, this is the perfect Kenny of the business fodder for starters. Not fodder, important subject matter. And I think there was also a story in the EDP about a lay-by where they were cutting back some bushes with where, let's say, some sexual activity took place. And again, missed a really good opportunity for a headline there. So I think, well, loving the work of our colleagues at the EDP, but they may need to up their pun game. Zoe is here and I am here for business if they need it. Pun business, that is. Anytime. I think in that case, I mean, that was literally perfect for Kenny of the business. I think the final thing to end on is Neil Luther pointing out that we can still get 96 points according to Michael. It would have been wrong of me not to have mentioned that, so thank you for bringing that up. Michael is very much on the we are still on for the 96 points bandwagon, and I think we should continue to mention that until we're no longer on to get 96 points.
In terms of bandwagons, could we also get on the Norwich getting promoted and Ipswich not getting promoted bandwagon as well, because that would be quite a fun outcome of the season, especially the way that we both started this season. So yeah, I'm getting on that bandwagon, I think.
I tell you what, I have resigned myself for most of the season to the fact that we're just going to be playing each other next year, and I'm not so sure.
We'll never play them again. It's happening.
Yeah. The song is real. The song is true. Anyway, thank you very much, guys. That is all for today's On the Ball. As the clock ticks just over an hour, the Norwich City podcast is off to look at Todd's Instagram one last time. If you haven't already, then make sure you subscribe to On the Ball via your podcast player of choice. It's available free on your usual player. Just search Michael Bailey Norwich City, and do put the Norwich City in, because I tried searching Michael Bailey on YouTube, got some very interesting results on your preferred social platform, whether it's YouTube or not, and there it will be. Ratings and reviews wherever prompted are always hugely appreciated. If you want to get in touch with any questions or topic proposals, I'm not interested. So send Michael a direct message on Twitter at Michael J. Bailey, or you can send them to me if you want. You can still send us your suggestions for topics to discuss either by emailing twitterkers@icloud.com, that's TWITTERKERS, or using the hashtag twitterkers on Twitter. Whew. A big thank you then to our guests tonight, Elliot. Thank you so much. Worth the wait.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Good to be back. First one in 2023. Hopefully be on again this year at some point.
Absolutely. We'll have to make it happen, and bring Rob with you next time as well.
And fully fit Rob. I'll bring him.
Yeah. We will only accept fully fit players. This is the David Wagner regime now. Zoe, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
And for me too. We are not here at all next week, I'm afraid. As we've already said, we're back in a fortnight's time, by which time the transfer window will have closed, and we will know whether we are still on for 96 points. Michael will be back to turf me out then, when we'll probably be talking about 4 more goals or something like that. Until which time, take care, and to coin someone else's phrase, never mind the danger.